Pop Smoke and an investigation now into what happened at his gravesite. We know what happened, it's who's responsible. Horribly vandalized. Over the weekend, they discovered that the tomb where he has been laid to rest, destroyed by someone. You can see his last name, real name Jackson.
By the way, desecrating a gravesite is a crime.
Oh.
Yeah, guys, this is just really disgusting.
A grieving mother knelt down at her son's grave, looked at the broken marble, the scattered debris, the burn marks from smoke joints left behind by the people who did this, and said, "Whoever you are, you have my attention. Now what?" That's Audrey Jackson, the mother of Bashar Baraka Jackson. The world knows him as Pop Smoke. And she said those words in September 2021, more than a year after she buried her 20-year-old son, the king of Brooklyn drill, after a gang of juveniles broke into his Hollywood Hills Airbnb and shot him dead over a diamond-studded Rolex. Let that sink in for a second. And this woman already had to bury her child, already had to watch her son get laid to rest at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, draped in grief and surrounded by hundreds of fans who packed the streets of Canarsie to send him home. Already had to wake up every morning knowing her son, a young man who was about to change the entire trajectory of hip-hop, got taken out at 20 years old. And then somebody went to his grave, cracked the marble plaque carrying his name, left drag marks on the ground outside the crypt, drag marks that told police somebody actually tried to pull that casket out of the wall. These are the Hoovers, and this is the story of what they did, why they did it, what Audrey Jackson said about it, and what it means for everything Pop Smoke represented. Stay locked in, gang, because this one goes deep. To understand how we even got to this point, a mother cleaning up her murdered son's desecrated grave, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to Canarsie, Brooklyn, back to a block called East 92nd Street, where the young shorty they called Bashar Baraka Jackson was already becoming a legend before the world even knew his name. Pop Smoke was born July 20th, 1999. His mom's, Audrey Jackson, is Jamaican. His pops, Greg Jackson, is Panamanian. Canarsie, for those who don't know, is a neighborhood in the southeast cut of Brooklyn. They call it the Flossie because the people there have always had a reputation for being flashy, showing out, keeping it 100 with their style. The streets raised Pop, no cap. He attended 9 different schools growing up because the life he was living had him constantly on the move. He was getting into it, staying in trouble, doing what kids from his environment do when the system doesn't give them a real alternative. He got expelled from middle school for bringing a gun to school, spent 2 years under house arrest. He'd later tell people in interviews that house arrest was actually what forced him to stay in school and get his diploma, because that ankle bracelet gave him no choice. Then at 15, the universe threw him a bone. He got a full basketball scholarship to Rock Top Academy, a prep school in Philadelphia. Point guard, shooting guard. The kid had game. He relocated, got into the program, looked like he had a clear path. Then his heart said no. He was diagnosed with a heart murmur, had to leave the program, came back to Canarsie. And when he came back, the streets were right there waiting for him like they never left. He fell into the Woo. That's his set, his affiliation, the Crips extension tied to the Brooklyn streets he came up in. This is important context, fam, because the Woo isn't just a rap brand. It's a real thing. Those Woo calls you hear on the records, that's not just entertainment. That's the life he was really living. But here's what made Bashar different from the average shorty from Canarsie. Somewhere between the streets and the struggle, he found music. In 2018, he walked into a Brooklyn recording studio with his man Jay Guapo, and something clicked. He started rapping over drill beats he was finding on YouTube, specifically beats from a UK producer named 808 Mello. And when that deep baritone voice hit those dark, aggressive UK drill instrumentals, it created something that had never existed before in hip-hop. He called the sound Brooklyn Drill. He named himself Pop Smoke, a combination of Papa, the nickname his Panamanian grandmother gave him, and Smoko Guwap, what his childhood friends called him from back in the day. On April 23, 2019, he dropped Welcome to the Party, and the whole game changed. Real quick, let me paint this picture for y'all, because the rise of Pop Smoke was not a slow burn. This was a rocket ship. Welcome to the Party spread through New York like wildfire, like it had been sitting in the city's DNA waiting to come out. The energy was different. The voice was different. It wasn't Chicago drill. It wasn't trap. It was New York through and through, but wrapped in this UK instrumental architecture that made it sound simultaneously familiar and completely alien. Nicki Minaj hopped on the remix. Skepta hopped on the remix. The song went everywhere. Then came Dior. Then came Meet the Woo, his debut mixtape, in July 2019. The culture was going crazy. He linked up with 50 Cent. He linked up with Quavo. He went to Paris Fashion Week with Virgil Abloh. He was building his acting career. He appeared on Travis Scott's Jack Boys compilation on Gaddy. Then on February 7th, 2020, just 12 days before he died, he dropped Meet the Woo 2. It debuted at number 7 on the Billboard 200. That was his first top 10 album in the United States. The kid was 20 years old and he was running the whole thing. But here's where it gets crazy. The day before he was killed, February 18th, 2020, Pop Smoke and his friend Michael Duradola were posting on Instagram. Normal stuff, flexing for the gram, showing love, living the life they'd worked for. Except in one of those posts, you could clearly see the address of the Hollywood Hills Airbnb they were staying at, right there on the packaging of a gift bag. The full address, visible to anyone who was paying attention. Somebody was paying attention. At around 4:30 a.m. on February 19, 2020, 5 individuals, wearing hoodies, at least one of them in a ski mask, broke into that mansion. They were there for one thing: Pop Smoke's diamond-studded Rolex and his Cuban link chain. A 15-year-old boy, the youngest of the crew, later admitted to authorities in a recorded jailhouse interview that they asked Pop Smoke for the jewelry. Pop complied at first, and then he fought back, because that was Bashar. He wasn't built to fold. A confrontation broke out. The 15-year-old shot him 3 times in the back with a Beretta 9mm. Police arrived 6 minutes after receiving the call, found Pop Smoke with multiple gunshot wounds. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in West Hollywood. He was pronounced dead, 20 years old. The Rolex they killed him over? They sold it for $2,000.
Pop Smoke was known by some of the biggest names in the business, like Nicki Minaj and 50 Cent. His murder has stunned fans everywhere.
Everybody's talking about it. Police say suspects broke into his home and shot him. The home is on Hercules Drive in the Hollywood Hills.
Fans are starting to show up to pay their respects. Police still don't know the motive behind this shooting, whether it was an attempted robbery or something else, but you can see that they are still out here investigating and searching for suspects. Pop Smoke was a rapper who seemed to be on the rise. The 20-year-old seen in this recent music video was just about to head out on tour. But this morning, fellow musicians like Chance the Rapper are sending out condolences. They say Pop Smoke was shot and killed during an early morning break-in at a home in the Hollywood Hills. All police are saying right now is that they got a 911 call just before 5 a.m.
The radio call was called in by someone from back east and stated a friend of theirs' home was being broken into by multiple suspects and that one of them was armed with a handgun.
When police arrived at the home on Hercules Drive, they detained several people who turned out to be witnesses. Those men say there were between 2 and 6 suspects. At least one was wearing a mask.
That's the part that hits different every single time. $2,000. A man who was about to sell out arenas. A man who already had a top 10 album. A man who had Nicki Minaj on his remix and Travis Scott on his joint. Gone because some shorties wanted $2,000 worth of jewelry. Now let's talk about the Hoovers, because that's the connection that threads this whole story together, and it's the connection that led directly to what happened at Greenwood Cemetery, the Hoover criminals. If you're from LA, you already know. If you're not, let me break it down for you. The Hoovers, formerly known as the Hoover Crips before rebranding as the Hoover Criminals, are one of the most feared and notorious street gangs in Los Angeles. What makes them uniquely dangerous in the gang landscape is their positioning. Most gangs in LA are clearly either Bloods or Crips, and they operate on those traditional color lines. The Hoovers don't play by those rules. They kill both Bloods and Crips. They are known for hostile beef with Crip sets specifically, which is exactly why Pop Smoke, affiliated with the Wu, which is connected to the Crips, was a target in their eyes. On top of the gang politics, the Hoovers had developed a reputation for a very specific criminal enterprise, robbing luxury homes in the Hollywood Hills. Law enforcement had already been tracking a pattern of celebrity home invasions in the area, and the Hoovers were at the center of it. They called it flocking, the practice of hitting high-value rental properties and Airbnbs occupied by entertainers, athletes, and industry figures. The Hills was their hunting ground, so when Pop Smoke posted that address on Instagram, that information traveled. It got to the wrong people, and a crew of teenagers, the oldest of whom was 19, organized a home invasion that ended the life of the biggest voice in Brooklyn drill. On July 9, 2020, roughly 5 months after Pop Smoke was murdered, LAPD arrested 5 individuals connected to the killing, 3 adults and 2 minors. Among them,
breaking news, the LAPD has just made several arrests in the shooting death of rapper Pop Smoke. His real name is Audrey Jackson. This has been a high-profile case ever since the shooting that happened back in February. He was killed during a violent home invasion. At the time, Pop Smoke was staying at a home in the Hollywood Hills. The LAPD says 3 men and 2 teenagers have been arrested. We will bring you more information as it comes in, but again, 5 arrests in the murder of rapper Pop Smoke.
Corey Walker, 19 at the time of the murder, and Keandre Rogers, who was 18. The 2 underage suspects were processed through juvenile court. A 5th individual, Jaquan Murphy, was ultimately not charged in connection with Pop Smoke's death, though he faced separate charges. The 15-year-old eventually admitted in May 2023 to first-degree murder in juvenile court. He's expected to remain in a juvenile facility until the age of 25. The 17-year-old pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in a juvenile facility. Keandre Rogers pleaded guilty in 2023 as well. Corey Walker, the only adult charged in the case, dragged this thing out for nearly 5 years. He pleaded not guilty, cycled through lawyers, pushed for trial. But on February 4th, 2025, Walker finally entered a guilty plea: voluntary manslaughter and 2 counts of home invasion robbery. On February 21st, 2025, he was sentenced to 29 years in California State Prison.
Charged in rapper Pop Smoke's murder, sentenced to nearly 30 years in prison. 24-year-old Corey Walker pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter earlier this month.
When Audrey Jackson heard about Walker's plea, she told a Rolling Stone reporter, "It's over for everybody except for me. This never ends for me, and that's unfair. I appreciate they got justice to the fullest extent of the law, but my life doesn't change. I still don't have my son." Keep that quote close, because that woman carries that weight every day. Now, let's fast forward to September 2021, because what happened at Greenwood Cemetery is its own level of disrespect that needs to be addressed fully. It's September 10th, 2021. It's a Friday afternoon. At some point between 2:30 p.m. on Friday and 2 p.m. on Saturday, somebody pulled up to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, one of the most historic cemeteries in the entire country, where Pop Smoke had been laid to rest since March 2020, and desecrated his grave. Here's what the scene looked like when it was discovered: the marble plaque embedded into the outer wall of the mausoleum, the one engraved with Pop Smoke's birth name, Bashar Baraka Jackson, along with his date of birth and date of death, was cracked, nearly broken completely. This wasn't a graze. This was a deliberate, forceful act designed to break into the crypt. On the ground outside the mausoleum, there were drag marks, long, unmistakable drag marks. The kind you see when something heavy has been pulled across the ground. Investigators and witnesses on site believed, and this is not speculation, this is what the physical evidence suggested, that whoever was there tried to drag Pop Smoke's casket out of the wall. A black concrete slab, believed to be the separator between Pop Smoke's level of the crypt and the space above it, was reportedly found perched on a nearby bench at the mausoleum. That slab being moved out of position confirmed for NYPD that the intruders actually made it inside the tomb. The Greenwood Cemetery's own spokesperson, Jeff Simons, confirmed an incident of vandalism took place on the grounds and stated that authorities were immediately notified. To cover the damage in the immediate aftermath, cemetery staff placed an unmarked marble slab over the broken area and wrapped the site in yellow caution tape. Total damage estimates came in at around $500. But you already know this isn't about the dollar amount. It never was. NYPD launched an investigation. One critical problem: there were no security cameras covering that section of the cemetery. No footage, no direct visual evidence. The investigation was based entirely on physical evidence and witness accounts from people who discovered the scene early Saturday morning. As of the reports that came out in September 2021, no suspects had been arrested. The investigation was ongoing. And here's where the connection to the Hoovers comes back into the conversation, fam, because the streets were already talking. Look at the context. Pop Smoke had been killed by individuals associated with the Hoover criminals. The Hoovers had an active, documented beef with Crip-affiliated individuals, and Pop's Wu affiliation put him squarely in that territory. The grave desecration bore the hallmarks of something that goes beyond random vandalism. This wasn't some fan acting out. You don't try to drag a casket out of a crypt for fun. You don't travel to a cemetery, crack marble, haul out a concrete slab, and pull at a casket because you're bored on a Saturday. The internet went crazy when this story broke. People were connecting the dots immediately. The same gang energy that was believed to have motivated the original murder, the anti-Crip positioning of the Hoovers, the deliberate targeting of someone affiliated with a rival set, was being applied to what happened at Greenwood. Street analysts, hip-hop commentators, and fans all pointed to the same thing. This looked like a continuation of the same disrespect. Think about what dragging a casket out of a grave represents in that world. That's not just vandalism. That's a statement. That's someone saying the beef doesn't end at death. That's desecration as a message. And in the context of what happened to Pop Smoke, the timing, the location, and the nature of the act all pointed toward people who were connected to or sympathetic with those who had taken his life. The NYPD said no arrests had been made. The streets said they already knew who was responsible. On Monday, September 13th, 2021, Audrey Jackson went to Instagram, and she didn't stay quiet about it. She posted a series of videos and photos documenting the damage. You could hear in her voice, through the camera, through the caption, that this woman was carrying something that went beyond sadness. She was in it. She was standing at her son's broken grave, pointing out the chips in the marble, the evidence of the break-in, the mess those people left behind. So, chips left over from either them trying to break in or from it being fixed to at least have it covered, she said in the video, her voice steady but heavy. But this was unnecessary, whoever you are. And in the caption of the post, she wrote something that hit different. Whoever you are, you have my attention. Now what? That's a mother speaking. Not from weakness, from fire. She wasn't folding, she wasn't crying in the corner. She was putting whoever did this on notice that she sees them, that she's not going to let her son be disrespected in death after everything that was done to him in life. She also shared a follow-up post showing Pop Smoke's father, Greg Jackson, cleaning up the mess at the site. Then, in another post, she updated her followers with one of the most human, heartbreaking captions of the whole situation. She posted a photo of herself kneeling by her son's grave and wrote, "We cleaned up, we sat and talked to each other and to him." Read that again. They cleaned up a vandalized grave, and then they sat and talked to their son. Let me tell you what this moment reveals about Audrey Jackson as a person. This woman has been fighting from the jump. She didn't just lose her son. She had to navigate a murder investigation, a drawn-out legal process that took 5 years to reach any kind of resolution, and she had to do all of it in public with the world watching, while simultaneously building the foundation that Pop Smoke had started before he died. The Shoot for the Stars Foundation, aimed at helping inner-city youth find paths forward out of the conditions that took her son. When Walker finally pleaded guilty in February 2025, Audrey Jackson's words said everything. The law did its job, but the law can't give her back what she lost. That kind of grace under the weight of permanent grief is something most people will never fully understand unless they've been there. Cleopatra Bernard, the mother of XXXTentacion, who knows exactly what it means to bury a young son taken by violence, commented on Audrey's post when the grave vandalism happened. She wrote, "I'm so sorry, people are sick." That exchange between two mothers who both buried their sons to street violence says more about the cost of all this than any rap beef breakdown ever could. Now, there's a broader conversation happening in the culture about this specific incident that y'all need to hear, because the grave vandalism didn't exist in isolation. Around the same time frame, Pop Smoke's mural in Brooklyn was also vandalized. That's a separate incident documented later, but it paints the full picture of an ongoing, coordinated disrespect campaign aimed at Pop Smoke's legacy. His face on a wall in his own neighborhood got defaced. His body in the ground at Greenwood got disturbed. This was not random. The culture felt it, and the culture responded. Here's what I need y'all to really sit with for a minute, because this story is bigger than just what happened at a cemetery in Brooklyn in September 2021. Pop Smoke, at 20 years old, had done something that almost no artist in hip-hop history had accomplished at that age and at that level. He had created a lane, not just for himself, but for an entire generation of Brooklyn artists. Before Bashar, the Brooklyn sound in hip-hop was defined by legacy. Biggie, Jay-Z, the GS9 era, with Bobby Shmurda. Pop Smoke took that DNA and fused it with the UK drill architecture in a way that created something entirely new. He built a bridge between Brooklyn and London. He gave the culture a new template. And then he was killed over a Rolex by teenagers who were barely old enough to vote. The immediate aftermath of his death showed you just how significant he was. His posthumous album, Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon, dropped on July 3, 2020, executive produced by 50 Cent. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. #1, After Death. Fivio Foreign, Roddy Ricch, DaBaby, Quavo. The whole roster showed up to honor him. The album went multiple times platinum, streams through the roof. The world was confirming what Canarsie already knew. This was supposed to be just the beginning. So when the Hoovers, or people connected to that energy, came to his grave and tried to drag his casket out of the wall, they weren't just vandalizing a piece of marble. They were attacking the legacy. They were trying to extend a beef past the point where it was even physically possible to extend it. They were sending a message to Canarsie, to the Woo, to Brooklyn, to everyone who ever screamed woo at a Pop Smoke concert or cried when that first posthumous album dropped. And the message came back hard, from his mother, on Instagram, with photos of a cleaned-up grave and a caption that read like a prayer and a warning at the same time. This is what street beef costs, gang. Not just the immediate life, not just the Rolex, not just the 20 years of potential. It costs the peace of a mother who has to choose between mourning in private and defending her son's name in public. It costs a father who has to drive to a cemetery, get on his hands and knees, and clean up someone else's statement of hate. It costs a community that already lost Biggie, that already lost Nipsey, that now has to count Pop Smoke among the fallen before he ever got to show us what 40 years old looked like. Canarsie has their angel now, that's what they say. Bed-Stuy has Biggie. Crenshaw has Nipsey. Canarsie has Pop Smoke. But here's the real tea that I want to leave y'all with. Audrey Jackson did not fold. She stood up at that grave, on camera, and told whoever was responsible that they now had her attention. She built the Shoot for the Stars Foundation to take her son's mission. Keep the kids out of the streets, give them something to reach for, and turn it into something permanent. She showed up in court after Cory Walker's guilty plea and told the press that justice doesn't fill the absence her son left. That takes a kind of strength that most people will never be called to demonstrate. What happened at Greenwood Cemetery on that September weekend was an act meant to erase, an act meant to say that the disrespect continues, that the beef has no bottom, that nothing, not death, not a casket, not marble engraved with a young man's name, is sacred enough to be left alone. They tried to drag Pop Smoke out of his grave. They failed, because you cannot drag someone out of the culture they helped build. You cannot crack the marble off a movement. Bashar Baraka Jackson did not go anywhere. His voice is still on speakers from Brooklyn to London. His sound is still shaping every new wave of drill music that comes out of New York. His mom's is still in the streets fighting for his name with a level of grace and fire that the people who broke into that crypt will never be able to comprehend. The Hoovers took a life over a $2,000 watch. They got 4 convictions and decades in prison for it. The youngest of them won't be free until he's 25. The oldest just got sentenced to 29 years. None of them are living the life they thought they were about when they walked into that Airbnb at 4:30 in the morning. And Pop Smoke, his album went #1. His foundation is still running. His mother is still standing. That's what the streets actually respect, no cap. Not the ones who take, the ones who keep going after everything has been taken from them. Long live Bashar Baraka Jackson. The smoke will never clear. Y'all already know what to do. Drop your thoughts in the comments.